Hello everyone and welcome back to my RTS game project here. My name is Philip and today I'll be showing you some weekly updates of what I've been building behind the scenes here. And let's see a couple of updates regarding assets importing through Blender and the structure we're going to be using to load them up inside our RTS game, and also some restructuring that I did with my project. So let's go right ahead. This is some cool information. I think you'll like it. For my objects list, I have been making a structure for it, and I think it works okay for now, and I'll probably expand this as I need it. So this idea came from the previous video of trying to make a structure to place objects, and instead of having to deal with groups, I think I'm able to work with this the way it is now. So the idea was to create a simple structure using nodes that whenever we place the objects inside of it, we are going to know which object is going to be because of the relation of the structure here. So whenever I place units inside of the units node, I know they are units and I can connect signals back to the RTS map world and stuff to deal with them as well. So this simplifies the logic a little bit as well. Next thing I changed in the structure of my project is the map thing. So before it was all handled together, now it's parented by the navigation region 3D, which gives a preview of the settings we are going to be using to make the regions. So this is also from previous videos. So you simply make a preview of the navigation mesh you want. So basically set the settings you want. And I later just cleared the navigation mesh because the navigation mesh is not the important part, only the settings are. Then I can simply duplicate this for every single region of the terrain. Then later it's going to generate a new navigation region. So by having the map being the parent of all these nodes, I have the following structure here. First off, I have all the map parts inside the map mesh, which is a node 3D. Then I have another node, which is the map navigation node, which is going to store the navigation nodes for all of those mesh regions that we're going to be generating in true code, also done in the previous tutorial about regions. Then I'm storing here the map collisions. So this is mostly used for the mouse positioning of units, targeting orders, etc. So this is mostly stuff that are going to be used for the mouse, but we can also use for collisions for physics and some extra things you can place like particles. Whenever we destroy a big building and stuff, we can basically collide with this terrain. There are some updates needed, as you can see here, but all in all, it should work pretty nicely. And it's a simple geometry generator from Blender. Also done a video about how to generate this map collision mesh. So it got the shape and that's about it. So we have the map collisions. And I also placed my map fog of war system, which is the structure which generates the fog of war for all the units, and it's placed inside of there as well. So it belongs to the map, and we have the environment where we can enable fog and stuff for our 3D world as we want. Also affect the sky, and this should be the environment for the map. So whenever we want to change the environment, this is the place. And we also have our directional lighting, which is the sun. But whenever we want to change the color or stuff, this should be the place to do it. So now everything is structured pretty nicely inside the map thing, which if I wanted, I can also turn it off and go back to just seeing which are the units in the map. So this is pretty nice structure for me. I also have separated all my debug tools, and basically these are all the nodes that I'm using to debug stuff from the game. And this is just temporary stuff. I can pretty much just delete this and don't worry about it. So all in all, this structure for the project I think has been much better than previously. We had a bunch of separate nodes, and this big change also made me restructure the code to separate the nodes and grab from where they were. So I'm also using a toolscript node for the world for the RTS map for stuff that I need in the editor to change. So right now, I don't think there's much in here aside from accessing units and stuff. But this allows me to basically run code through the editor. So this is a simple node that is inside our RTS map world that's going to define some functions and stuff we want for, let's say, units and other editor nodes. So this is just some extra helper that I can basically delete after we start the game. So this is about it for the restructuring of the project. Now, something that I want to talk about is how I'm generating factions. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of nodes that are my units. So I change how my units are being generated. So as you can see here, a lot of stuff has changed. I have placed a toScript node that I'm basically going to be removing once the game starts. And you can see here that this is the code for it. And whenever we run the game and enter the ready function and we are not in the editor, we're going to basically delete it. And this is just a placeholder for me to place functions in here that is going to change the stuff that you see here. So I mainly have here a label 3D that I'm going to be basically editing with the name of the unit. And I am going to set the modulation to the color of the faction of the unit so I can see in the editor. And I have a sprite 3D here to show me the direction of the unit whenever I'm placing them inside of the 3D RTS world. So this will allow me to place units and see the direction they are facing forward, which is -Z, and will allow me to place the units inside the map. I also have the selected, the HP bar, which I basically have to set to code if I want this to be at the base of the unit or at the top. So this should be different for every unit. I have to make some kind of data structure to set this up as well. So this toScript is just stuff to see behind the scenes. So basically this is the structure. However, also, if you notice, there's something here that I changed that you don't see that sample 3D model that I was using. So I changed some stuff, and whenever we place this inside our game, you're going to see that we don't have the 3D mesh as well. And I believe I have some units somewhere here. Might be worth it to put a sample 3D mesh just for me to see where are all the units. As you can see here, we have different colors for the units. So before we jump into that, you see that we don't have the 3D models here. So I actually removed the 3D model from this RTS unit and I'm going to be generating through code. So the idea that I have is for us to load a GLTF file, and we are going to be basically doing the following. Let me just make it local so we can access this. So this is the basic structure from whenever you export a asset, a animated asset, which is skinned and rigged to a armature from Blender. So you see we have the mesh here, and this is the soldier mesh. I don't know if I have the material here to place on top of it to generate it. I believe I don't. This also is stuff that we generated through code. Maybe I can just drop the texture on top of this and it will work. There we go. So this is my soldier for the RTS, and as you can see, it has all the stuff. So there's the skeleton 3D, and its parents to the skeleton. This does not need to be the case. This mesh can be wherever else we want, and the animations will still work. As the relation here is, this does not need to be parented by the skeleton 3D, it just only needs to be assigned the skin and the skeleton. And if you move this, wherever you move, doesn't have any issues. So we can basically do that. But there's a big issue here that I have learned with animations. And there is a solution, but I don't think it's worth it to do it. So let me explain to you. Whenever you export this animation from Blender, so whenever you export it, this is the structure that you're going to be having. So we have the mesh, the skeleton, the armature from Blender, and the GLTF generator. So you can see here RTS base soldier 1 GLB, and this is the name of this node. So if we were making an RTS, we want to optimize a lot of things, and one of them is to reduce unnecessary nodes. So what I've come up with is we actually only need these nodes, right? We only need the skeleton, our mesh, and the animation player. So we can play animations within our unit. So the issue that I had was that if you want to strip this out of this structure of nodes, we're going to have an issue with the animation data exported from Blender. Because if you see here, we have a roof node for this animation player, and we can change this. But the stuff that we cannot change is this right here. You can see RTS, basic soldier, armature 005, and there is the name of the skeleton and the name of the bone. So for every single bone in this armature, it was exported with the name of the armature. So this is a big issue because if you remove them from this node, the animation data is not going to work because it needs to work with the name of the armature. So if we wanted to remove the unnecessary nodes, which is these two nodes, we're going to need our mesh, the skeleton data, and the animation player. Now this is going to break the animation data. You can see a lot of errors will be generated because they cannot find the bones anymore. The animation data doesn't have a way to access the bones again. And we can try to change the roof node back to our RTS unit to try to select the skeleton 3D. But there's a big issue. The names for the animation track data, you can still see they are here. The RTS Basic Soldier Armature 005. So if you want to remove unnecessary nodes, the mesh can be removed from this structure, but the animation player in the skeleton 3D does not. And if you see, whenever we select it, we always get a bunch of areas here. So the sad thing about this is that the armature node 3D, it's not doing anything here, and we are still going to need it to be on our structure for this to work properly regarding the animation data. So one of the solutions is to access all the animation data for every given unit and to basically remove this prefix which holds the armature name. So that will be a solution. But for the sake of an easier workflow, what we're going to do to all the units is to basically do the following. So let me just hide this and replacing our GLTF. So we're going to import the GLTF. We are going to basically be accessing it. We're going to be stripping it away from the first node, which is the GLTF node 3D. We don't need that. Then we're going to have this. We're going to be deleting the remaining extra node. We don't need that node, and I'm going to delete this as well. Then we need to fix the root animation. So we will need to access the animation player, go through it, says where is the roof node, and we're going to be assigning it back to be the RTS unit. All of those steps are going to be needed to done through code. So now the animation is going to work properly because, as you can see here, we have the stuff that is being recorded for the animation track data. For the animation data is RTS Basic Soldier Armature 005. So it's the name of the armature exported from Blender, then the skeleton. So the roof node you can change here. But the stuff that's being recorded on the animation data, the name of the armature exported from Blender still needs to be here. And the last step for this workflow for the units will be to access the mesh of the units and to assign a given material. So we're going to be basically prepping a simple shader to just have some parameters, and we're going to be assigning the textures back to it. So this will be the step for every unit asset. So if you wanted, you can basically strip this away. You can basically strip the skeleton 3D and the mesh and delete the last remaining node 3D. So you have fewer nodes to deal with, which will improve performance. But the issue you're going to have is you need to go access the animation track data for every single animation you're going to have for every single asset you're going to be exported from Blender. And you're going to be needed to change the animation track data. So this is possible to do, but I don't think it's worth the trouble for just an extra node 3D. So if we needed to get some more performance later, we can do that, but I don't think it's going to be worth it. So instead, we're going to be keeping that extra node, but we can basically remove the first node. So all of that is going to be done through code. So our units is going to be a placeholder until we load them up inside our RTS world. And whenever the game starts, we're going to be loading the asset and doing all of those steps. So this should take care of it. And we should be able to generate every single unit we need for our game. So that will be the workflow that I'm going to use to load assets inside my game as units. And this will be almost the same replicated through buildings and stuff. So basically, whenever we want to create units in the game, we're going to be generating these RTS units and loading assets as we see fit. So we could have a soldier or a base mech, stuff like that. So that is going to be pretty cool for our RTS. So the workflow is going to be those, and basically we're going to be generating units later in the game. So something else I want to display to you, if you notice I have selected my world here. So this will be the RTS map world. It's going to hold a lot of important things. And you're going to see that I made a faction system here. So I basically have exported some vars here that is going to be regarding our factions. So faction, previously I made some static enumerations to hold the names and stuff. Here, however, because I have using export var, I can basically generate the names for every single faction that I want and the colors for it. And also the number of factions we're going to have in the game. So the idea for me is to generate it through the editor the factions we want. So we'll first set the size of the factions, the amount of factions, and you're going to change stuff later. So I can also make some kind of system to make diplomacy of factions. So the relation between factions, I can do this as well through an export. And as you can see here, you can set the color of the factions and this will respect it properly. So the way that this works is that whenever we start the game, I'm going to have to call in a function that is going to be on my world initialized function factions. And this world initialized faction is going to basically, for every faction in our group, be generating a dictionary for it inside the factions dictionary with the number of the faction. And I'm going to be assigned the name, the color, and we can assign the diplomacy and stuff later as well. So this will be generated and stored inside my RTS map world factions. So the way that this works is inside of my units. So if I am able to select the objects here in units, you're going to see that every single RTS unit, so wherever this one is, we're going to have some exported variables here as well for the two generated scripts. So I have here a Boolean variable that's going to be used to say that if we are, because there's two ways to create units. So we're going to be creating and placing units through the editor. So whenever you start the game, you're going to be using those. And we also are going to be generating units inside the game. Now the workflow is going to be different. So units generated inside the game, like you place a military building and you train some units, you're going to be generating units and loading their object data and stuff differently than if you set it through the editor. So the way that I've been doing and controlling this behavior is through a Boolean variable on the tool. And if I go to my RTS map unit, this stuff here is only for the editor. So I can also as well use this, but the logic that execute this is basically by checking if this variable is true, then I can set some behaviors for units placed from the editor. So whenever I initialize my units, whenever it's created and generated, this is, I believe, called from ready. So whenever we generate the unit, I'm going to be initializing it. And if the unit is placed in through the editor, so if I place the unit through the editor of Godot, I'm going to be basically doing some steps here, like loading its prefab data and processing and set its object data through factions. So this is going to be different whenever you create the units inside the game. And that is the way that I'm controlling it, by using a Boolean on the export. So one of the things that is going to change is, for instance, the faction. So whenever you build a unit, if you are building inside the game, you actually is going to be generated the unit faction based on the building faction. So there's no reason to generate a unit for another faction. So this property here will not be used. We're going to be grabbing a faction from the unit. So you're going to see that the workflow is different. And also here I made a list of all the units I have. And this will be set to load all of the object data. So the unit attack, movement, speed, HP, everything is going to be stored in what I call prefabs. So prefabs is going to be the structured data for the units. So I'm going to be talking about that through Gamedata. So everything that belongs to a unit, its name, its attack, movement, speed, stuff that is static, which I mentioned on previous videos, is going to be stored inside a Gamedata. And I'm going to be calling that prefab. So prefab is basically all the static data that belongs to a unit. So for instance, the name of the unit should not change. We can change that later inside the game to make hero units or special units. But this is stuff that's going to be mostly the same throughout all the units. And you can have, for instance, a unit's attack, a unit attack range, stuff that is going not to change as well. So all of this stuff is going to be basically assigned through the game data and being generated and exported to the game and being loaded here. And basically by me accessing its prefab ID, I'm going to be fetching all of this data and be assigned back as object attributes to my game. So you're going to see here we have the IDs here as integers, and I'm going to be loading them through, in the case of the editor, through this prefab ID here whenever we start the game. And if the unit is created inside the game, it'll be the same approach, loading stuff from the prefab ID, but some stuff is going to be changed. Something here that I'm doing is generating two scripts that's setting the faction colors. So we need to know what the faction color is. So I've exported here a two faction already. And if I save my scene here and reload, you're going to see that the color is going to change for this specific unit. After 3 seconds, you see they start as blank, then they get their color. So the way that that works is I'm fetching from the world editor helper here. I am checking through code. If we are in the editor, then I'm grabbing the world node, which is basically it's the parent. Then I'm waiting for units to get ready. So this is because the editor units can start differently. So I'm waiting 3 seconds. Then later for every single unit that is inside my objects unit, I am accessing its toScript node, which is its first child. So if I go to my RTS unit structure, you're going to see my toScript node is the first unit inside of this. So this is the debug stuff that you're going to be seeing on the editor. So after it has accessed it, so on the toScript here, I'm going to be accessing that toScript node from the unit and running a function. So this function is going to be basically setting the color for the stuff that I want. So you can see here that I'm going to be grabbing the faction from whoever called this function is going to need to pass the world. So the RTS map world toScript is going to be accessing units and running this function, which in turn is going to grab the faction for the world. And actually the faction is grabbed from the units. And the faction color is grabbed from the world, from the faction that is being assigned through the unit, through the editor script, and then basically changing the label modulation color back to that color. So that is the way that I'm going to know, and through the editor, which color belongs to that RTS object. And the last step for me will be to set the name of this label 3D. So I'm going to be setting the text for this unit to be the unit. So say it's going to be the soldier, so we know soldier. So we're going to know through the editor, whenever we place a soldier in the game, this will be changed the name as well. And the idea with this square here is just for me to see the color a little better. And this is a special character. So this will be the setup for me to be placing units inside the game. Now I have an issue with not seeing units wherever they are, so I might do an object 3D to see it or change some stuff. I can see wherever they are. So this is regarding my unit placement system, which I think is going to work pretty nicely. Some stuff that I want to mention is if you've been paying extra attention to my... So those are the changes that have been made, and I think I am getting closer to structure my RTS the way that I want and to continue building my game. So this is stuff that I am in the process of making it. Hopefully I'll see a big update and further tutorials as I go along. So this was all that I have to show you from this weekly update, a small devlog update. And hopefully I'll see you on the next video. So thank you for watching and I'll see you on the next one.